Now that you know how to properly use your fingers, knuckles, fists, forearms, elbows, and you have proper biomechanics, and you have the idea about sinking into tissue and grabbing tissue, I want to talk about several different kinds of strokes with a little more precision than what I've been talking about earlier. Earlier I need to really focus on how you're properly using your body. Now I want to talk about accomplishing something. A stroke without intention can be an empty gesture. And I want you to really remember that, because I've had a lot of massages in my life that have been done with great flourish, and they haven't accomplished much. And you can tell that people are focusing on the strokes rather than what they're trying to accomplish with the body. So I'm going to give a few different kinds of strokes here that will have precision in what your goals are so that your work becomes much more effective. The first type of stroke I'd like to demonstrate is the basic lengthening stroke. We're going to talk about different kinds of lengthening strokes later on, but the first one is the basic stroke most people learn in their first massage class, which is an Esalen stroke. It comes by many names, but basically you're going along the muscle fiber direction. You could switch to any tool you want to use now. You can use the forearm now. If I wanted to, I could use a fist. All of the time, I'm going in the direction of the muscle belly fibers. I'm not going to cross over the knee yet. It's too sensitive an area to really accomplish much in there. You need much more precise work. If I wanted to work with my knuckles right along the Achilles tendon, I could work in the same direction like this. Moving up to the hamstring, same idea. I often like to use broad surfaces like the forearm on the hamstring. Fist here, there's a tendency for those muscles to roll around the bone and you just don't have the stability. So I use the forearm a lot of the time here. Notice that I'm taking my bottom hand and I can turn the leg, I can stabilize the leg, and I can distract the leg. We'll talk more about distracting joints later on. The erectors, again, are the area that so many people are tied in, so the same thing. Basically, I'm going to run up the spine with the erectors here. I can do repeat strokes. I've demonstrated the use of the forearm in this area already. So let's demonstrate the knuckles to show how to save those thumbs. Triceps all the way down to the hands. Anything on the arm. This time you'll notice I'm not working toward the heart. A lot of classes really, at least in the early going, talk about the importance of always moving toward the heart. I believe there's a lot of times if you move nice and slowly that the cue that you're giving this arm to relax and drop out of the glenoid fossa there so that the shoulder isn't jammed there far overrides any possible benefit of moving toward the heart. By the same token, I can come this way and work on the forearm, anchoring here, and give the cue for this elbow to relax and distract, not be so compressed. These are your basic lengthening strokes. One of the things that we need to work with as massage therapists is to decompress joints rather than just stretching muscles. So I often try to think about working across joint lines so that I can give a cue to the body to relax a constricted joint. The hamstrings here will be a perfect example of how I can work to decompress the hip joint. A lot of people, if they're doing impact sports, landing with basketball, running, things like this, the hip joint gets compressed and every step you take it's pushed in. So I often like I'm going to work across Dina's body so you can see what's happening. My mechanics aren't great because I'm leaning a little too far forward. But what I can do is I can distract Dina's leg. So basically I'm pulling her femur a little lower in the acetabulum here, and then working in a stroke to lengthen this muscle in that same direction that I'm lengthening here. So I'm working in the same direction that I want to give her the cue to open up that muscle. And there I felt her femur just drop just a little bit, a nice subtle relaxation in the joint there. The lower hamstring and knee also works to show the same principle, but working with a slightly different stroke so that you can get an idea how you combine these different principles. If I want to decompress a knee, I certainly could do the same thing by working on the gastroc and pushing down this way while anchoring away in the opposite direction up here. Or if I want to stretch the hamstrings in the opposite direction, I just grab her tibia here, get a nice soft hold here, and then distract this joint here and move up this way. You can do this anywhere on the body. You can distract the shoulder joint by gently pulling the humerus away. You can distract the ankle, you can distract the wrist. Any of these are great ways to give the person a cue to have a looser joint. You can do the same thing on the quadratus lumborum here. I can take my hand and get a little bit of a hold of her quadriceps here and her femur and pull this down. I can even move her legs over a little bit to pull this hip joint away from the ribs here and stretch the quadratus. I could work with knuckles. I could work with fingers. I personally like to work with fingers here. You're not going to use too broad a surface because you have the floating ribs and the kidneys here. You want to have your force in a fairly small surface area. Dina's foot and ankle complex illustrates another important point that is not often covered in massage classes. We often try to extend a joint and make for greater range of motion, but some joints are unable to shorten properly. If you look very closely right around here, and when I have Dina dorsiflex her foot, you'll notice a little bit of jerkiness. It's almost like it's catching as it's shortening. So Dina, if you flex your ankle up, okay, it's not a very smooth movement there. So all I'm going to do is, instead of spending all of my time trying to just lengthen this foot, Dina's a swimmer and her foot often is very extended, so she has great range of motion on plantar flexion here. Her dorsiflexion is a little bit limited and she's not used to moving her foot that way, so I just sort of look like when the dog is screeching to a halt on the rug, that it just sort of buckles, and that's the sort of feeling that I have right here. So all I'm going to do is work in the direction that I want her ankle to work more smoothly. And this works very well with a knuckle or fingers. And all I do is I feel little cross fibers in the retinaculum here. We'll talk at length about the ankle and the strategies and troubleshooting injuries tapes, about how to get better function in the ankle and better balance in the foot. But right now, I'm just illustrating the point that you can also help a joint shorten and a muscle shorten here. So all I'm going to do is move her foot through her range of motion and expedite that movement by sliding over and grabbing any of the fibrous adhesions or other things that are impeding this movement. Sometimes 2 or 3 strokes here can make a big difference on how easily a joint will move, and your clients will really notice this. I always try to have a purpose in everything I do, rather than just squeezing tissue or making long strokes on the foot. I'm always thinking of joint function. So Dina, give this a try here and see if that works a little more smoothly for you. So I don't know if you can notice that on the camera, but it certainly does seem to me that there's a much smoother movement here. One of the things that, of course, could be impeding this would be the tight soleus or gastroc, which would mean that I would shorten this and at the same time stretch the posterior compartment here to increase her range of motion. Dina's wrist is another example of enabling a joint to shorten. Her action is actually pretty smooth here, but a lot of people that are doing things like working at a keyboard where their wrist is in a flexed position a fair amount of time, you really want to make ease in moving it up this way. If it's really tight and things are bunching in this area, that's where you start running into overuse injuries and carpal tunnel and all of these. So I'll just demonstrate very briefly some of the principles that I just demonstrated with the foot. All I would do is move Dina's hand through its range of motion in flexion, and then just work wherever I feel some tension here. I could also do some cross fiber strokes if I wanted to. People immediately notice the difference when you work in this way. I'm feeling more fascial bunching here than actual muscles not sliding.